Hopefully, we're going to take some questions from the audience here. So please, if you have something on your card, please give it to Kevin. We'll get going here. We're going to talk about low nonprofit overhead. There was a statistic that showed that lower overhead does not equal greater organizational efficiency. So what we're saying is that the author postulates that recent attention to administrative overspending in nonprofit organizations is perhaps unwarranted. Do you see such overspending as an issue facing Pittsburgh's nonprofit community? Basically, they're saying, I think Fred's going to start on this one too. And what do you think, once again, do we have an overspending issue here in our nonprofits in Western Pennsylvania? If you feel you need to put a cap like we did, organizations over a certain amount, fine. I know we're not trying to do that, but if you feel it's necessary. And do you think that organizations need to worry about keeping administrative costs lower is it better for grant purposes? Is it better to show up to the community and to your stakeholders? What is the balance between how much administrative cost do you need and what equals your proper efficiency for your organization?
Yeah, there's a lot there. I guess I would start by saying I don't know many people who, or at least funders, who do a calculation based upon overhead before they decide to fund something. Certainly, there'll be a general review of administrative costs versus overall effectiveness, but usually that breaks down in the number of programmatic areas. I think what's most effective is to see a budget spread across. A lot of people will take all their overhead and call it admin, which is a pretty dangerous forward way to do it. What you want to see is if they have 5 program areas and 13 employees, which employee spends what percentage of their time with respect to the particular program area, and see things spread across that. And to me, it's more a question of effectiveness than it is administrative overhead. Obviously, if somebody's paying exorbitant salaries, that's going to be an issue, or if they're way overstaffed based upon the program they deliver, or if it's a really high cost per recipient. So if you take a mentoring program, the average cost for a mentoring program nationally is about $1,800 a person. So if you see somebody spending $3,000 or $4,000 per mentor or mentee, that doesn't knock them out of the game, but it's sort of, you're a pretty expensive program. Show us why you're that expensive, and show us indications that the extra money spent is showing results. So I just don't think it's as simple as being expensive. So
the term overhead oftentimes gets tossed around like it's this extra item. And as one who has to write proposals and submit reports, overhead is something that you have to be able to explain to a funder. And your overhead is what is required for you to carry out and do the goods and services to the community or the constituent group that you serve. So your rent, your supplies, all those things that typically go in overhead, you need to be very careful and plan that out in your budget for how you allocate the cost. If you have 5 programs, it's logical that you spread it over 5 programs, and one program doesn't carry all of the rent, all of your salary, and all of the expenses for the supplies that you buy in your office. I think overhead, typically, the number that I always work with is 15%. 15% is hard to manage. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower, but it's a good baseline for me to look at when I'm looking at the programs and I'm writing up the documents. Where am I relative to that? Now, in actuality, on some programs, it comes in higher than that. Sometimes it's 21%, but you have to be able to justify it. All programs are not considered equal, as much as we'd like for them to be. But you have to be very careful when you talk about overhead in terms of how you spread the cost, the fundraising activity that goes with that, and then your administrative costs and how they get applied.
I agree with both of my fellow panelists up here. I think this is one of those issues that has really loaded language and is pretty bogus in most cases. For most, again, most nonprofits have 10 or fewer. A vast majority of nonprofits have 3 or fewer employees. So in that small an office, the fact that somebody has the title of executive director does not mean that they spend their days luxuriously moving paper around on their desk or, occasionally asking somebody for $1. What they do is they get there at 6 o'clock in the morning, they open the doors so the children can get on the bus, get some breakfast before they get on the bus. They're lucky if at 5 o'clock in the afternoon they have a chance to do a bit of administration. They've done programmed the livelong day. And if they are assigning their budget, their salary to an administrative cost, that's simply not the case. So that point has really been made. We have had in Charity Navigator, I think, a difficult kind of a measure for donors, because it's been positioned as if people in nonprofits were making exorbitant salaries and leading very luxurious lives. I've had over 3,000 nonprofits as my clients and students, and I have very seldom seen any excessive anything in a nonprofit environment. Now, I won't say there isn't some. There obviously is, and when Chuck Grassley was doing the work on the 990 Forum in the Senate Finance Committee, he paraded through the halls of Congress the biggest collections of scoundrels and thieves you'd ever want to see. So I'm certainly not naive enough to think that no one is overpaid and no one is not really earning their keep. But the vast majority of the people in nonprofit organizations work long hours for little money in offices that would make a dog cry. So we really need to have this conversation be about effectiveness and about respect, so that people are treated fairly in their organization, given sufficient and adequate equipment to do their jobs well, and then deliver on the promises made in a way that makes everyone, whether the donor, funder, or the volunteers in the organization, feel really good about being a part of that organization, because it's truly doing work that is respectable.
Hey guys, any questions from anybody out there?